There is a rule in football that most people watching this tournament didn't know existed until 72 minutes into a World Cup quarterfinal in Kansas City. A rule so obscure, so rarely applied, so structurally dependent on a specific chain of events that even experienced coaches admitted afterward they had never encountered it before in competitive football. And on Saturday afternoon at Arrowhead Stadium, that rule ended Switzerland's World Cup campaign, reduced Breel and Bolo to tears on the touchline, and sent Remo Freuler to the post-match microphones with fury written across every word he said. Switzerland were level, 1-1. Argentina, the defending world champions, had been rattled by Dan Ndoye's equalizer 5 minutes earlier, and for the first time in the match, the Swiss genuinely looked like they could win this game. 11 against 11. Their structure was holding, their belief was visible. And then, in the space of 3 minutes, everything collapsed because of a sequence of events that nobody inside that stadium fully understood while it was happening. This is what actually occurred. Leandro Paredes challenged Breel and Bolo inside the Argentine penalty area. The referee, Portuguese official João Pinheiro, initially decided Paredes had fouled Embolo and pulled out a yellow card for the Argentine midfielder. Standard decision. Paredes booked, Switzerland keeping pressure on Argentina. And then VAR intervened. Here's where things get interesting. The VAR team, operating from their hub in Dallas, reviewed the footage and determined that the referee had made an error of mistaken identity. Not that no foul had occurred, not that the yellow card was too harsh, that the wrong player had been shown the card. Looking at the replays, the officials concluded that it was actually Embolo who had simulation, that he had thrown himself to the ground without sufficient contact from Paredes to justify going down. Under the mistaken identity rule, the referee withdrew the yellow card for Paredes and instead showed the caution to Embolo. And because Embolo had already received the yellow card earlier in the match for a foul on Paredes, that second booking meant an automatic red card. Switzerland down to 10 men, 68 minutes still to play in regulation, plus whatever extra time followed. Argentina eventually won 3-1 after extra time, and Switzerland went home. Now, let's be precise about the technical rule that was applied here, because understanding it is essential to evaluating whether what happened was correct or catastrophic. FIFA's guidelines on mistaken identity state that if a referee penalizes an offense, but has clearly misidentified the player who committed that offense, only the identity of the offender can be reviewed by VAR. The rule exists to prevent situations where a wrong player gets punished because a referee misread who did what in a fast-moving incident. In principle, that's a sensible safeguard. But here is the critical detail that makes the situation uniquely explosive. The guidelines do not limit mistaken identity reviews to players of the same team. In other words, VAR can determine that not only did the referee give the card to the wrong player, but that the card actually belonged to a player on the opposing team, which is exactly what happened. Paredes was the wrong player in the referee's original reading. Embolo was the right one. Different teams, same incident. And because of Embolo's earlier booking, the correct application of the rule produced a red card. Freuler's reaction after the final whistle did not hold anything back. Speaking to reporters, he said it was just a disaster, that he didn't know what the referee was doing there, and that he didn't understand why they called it for a situation like that, because there were many fouls made in the first half that he felt should also have resulted in yellow cards. He said he didn't understand how VAR could change a game with that situation. ESPN. Freuler also called for an explanation from the governing body directly, saying he didn't understand how VAR could make such a decision, and that FIFA had to explain it to them. Yahoo Sports. Granit Xhaka, the Switzerland's captain, was equally direct. He said the decision could kill a game, that he could understand VAR reviewing certain situations to correct clear errors, but that a decision of this kind, one that changed the entire dynamic of a quarterfinal by reducing a team to 10 men, went far beyond what the technology should be doing in a match of this magnitude. He said Switzerland had Argentina where they wanted them at 11 versus 11, and that the sending off made it impossible to continue playing the same way. Coach Murat Yakin said the situation was extremely hurtful and that he felt his side had been punished by a referee mistake. He said he hadn't known this rule before, that it was a very harmless situation. A yellow card was awarded, VAR interfered, and that the introduction of such a rule was just unnecessary. Yakin defended Embolo directly, saying the striker had been fouled many times during the match and had produced some very good moments before he could no longer help the team. He said he didn't blame Embolo and that the player was shattered because he couldn't help his teammates after the dismissal. Yahoo Sports. An emotional Embolo was left in tears after his dismissal and was consoled by teammates as he walked off the pitch. Yahoo Sports. Now, let's talk about the irony embedded in this entire situation, because it's almost too pointed to ignore. The mistaken identity review was triggered by a challenge involving Paredes and Embolo, and the yellow card that Embolo received in the first half, the one that made his second booking automatic, was also for a foul on Paredes. The same two players, the same dynamic, two yellow cards in the same match, both connected to the same Argentine midfielder, both resulting in bookings for the Swiss forward, and the second one, produced through a VAR review that corrected a decision in Argentina's favor, was the one that ended Switzerland's World Cup. There's also a structural issue with the rule itself that multiple officiating experts have been discussing since the match, and it matters for understanding why even those who believe the letter of the law was correctly applied are still troubled by what happened. The irony highlighted by the match and noted by observers is this. If Pinheiro had simply not shown a card to Paredes in the first place, the VAR review would never have been triggered. The mistaken identity protocol requires a card to have been shown in order to review who it should have gone to. No original card means no review. Embolo plays on. Switzerland stay at 11 men. The entire sequence that ended their tournament was set in motion by the referee's decision to book Paredes, a decision which VAR then reversed, but which, by reversing, created the conditions for the red card. That is an extraordinary chain of institutional logic. A referee makes a decision, VAR corrects it, the correction causes more damage to the team that originally appeared to be the beneficiary of the correct decision than the original wrong decision ever could have. And the team on the receiving end of all of this is left asking how a technology designed to improve fairness produced an outcome that felt like the opposite of fair. But there's another angle that needs to be addressed honestly and directly. Looking at multiple replays of the Paredes-Embolo contact, the evidence that Embolo went to ground without sufficient justification was not trivial. Several analysts and officiating experts who reviewed the footage concluded that there was a case for simulation, that Embolo felt minimal contact and chose to fall. If that reading is accurate, then VAR did exactly what it was designed to do. Correct a clear and obvious error where the wrong player was punished for something the other player actually did. The fact that the correct application of the rule produced a brutal outcome for Switzerland doesn't necessarily mean the rule was applied incorrectly. What it does mean is that the rule itself, the specific combination of mistaken identity review applied across different teams with a second yellow consequence, produces outcomes that most people watching football had never anticipated when VAR was introduced. And when a rule produces outcomes that nobody anticipated, including the coaches and players subject to it, the question of whether the rule was well designed becomes legitimate and urgent. This matters because Switzerland aren't just any team in the context of World Cup history. This was their first quarterfinal since 1954, more than 70 years ago. They had navigated a genuinely difficult tournament path, beating Algeria in the round of 32 and arriving in Kansas City with a squad that had demonstrated real tactical discipline and collective quality across 5 matches. They had Xhaka in the form of his international career. They had Ndoye causing problems for Argentina's defense throughout the first half. And for 67 minutes, they were right in the match, level, with everything still to play for. The Embolo red card changed the match irrevocably. Argentina, who had found Switzerland difficult to break down at 11 versus 11, suddenly had the space and the numerical advantage to impose their quality on a depleted Swiss defense across 35 minutes of regulation and then 30 minutes of extra time. Lautaro Martinez and Messi, who had been kept relatively quiet by Switzerland's shape, found room they hadn't had before the red card. The 3-1 scoreline reflects that numerical advantage as much as it reflects quality difference between the teams. The broader context that Freuler's fury sits within is one that has been building across this entire tournament. This is not the first VAR controversy at the 2026 World Cup. It's not the second or the third. Egypt had a goal disallowed for a foul committed on the opposite end of the pitch. Belgium filed a formal complaint over the Bulligan suspension reversal. Algeria filed a complaint over officiating in their match against Argentina. Switzerland had a VAR technical outage in their very first match of the tournament that created confusion about a penalty decision that remained unresolved for hours. And now, this. A rule most coaches admitted they didn't know existed, producing a red card in a World Cup quarter-final that eliminated one of the competition's most credible remaining sides. Yakin said something in his post-match press conference that cut through everything else with particular clarity. He said football didn't come out on top. Not Switzerland, not Argentina, football itself. And that framing, the idea that when a match is decided by an obscure rule applied through a technology review rather than by the players on the pitch, the sport itself loses something, is the sentiment that Freuler's fury and Embolo's tears were really expressing. What do you think? Was the Embolo red card the correct application of a legitimate rule that exists to prevent wrongful punishment of the wrong player, or did the specific circumstances of this quarterfinal expose a design flaw in how the mistaken identity protocol was built? Does the accumulation of VAR controversies across this entire World Cup suggest that the technology has expanded beyond its original mandate in ways that are now actively damaging the tournament? And if you were designing the rules for the next World Cup, would you keep the mistaken identity cross-team review protocol exactly as it is, modify it, or remove it entirely? Let us know in the comments below, subscribe so you don't miss our semifinal coverage, and like this video if this conversation matters to you.